Hello, Internet. Welcome to episode 292 of the Assorted Calibers podcast. The Second Amendment podcast is a little bit for everyone. I'm Weer'd, and with me tonight, she's the greatest. She's the most wonderful. Oh my God, I'm lucky that she's here. The greatest hostess in the world, Erin Paulette. How you doing, Erin?
You know, on the drive home, I had a really good answer to this, and it has just completely fled my brain. It's just dust with a tumbleweed passing through. So I'm gonna go with I'm doing okay. How are you doing, Weer'd?
David's been passing around an ADHD meme a lot, and it's one of those like I am in this picture, and I've been saying it a lot. Is I had a thought, and then I had another thought, and the two of them hit each other, and they went flying, and now I can't find either of them. Yeah,
that's getting worse for me.
I say that to my daughter all the time. Never mind the fact that, you know, she does the young kid thing of the just interrupt you in the middle of a thought. I have something to say, and if I don't say it right now, I'll forget it. Well, now I've forgotten my thought. Now we're both unhappy.
I don't know anyone to whom that applies. Hi, David. Hi, Weer'd.
I mean, there is a whole lot of ADHD in this podcast.
Uh-huh. Starting to think you've given it to me.
Gives us our special powers. Well, but
so how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing better.
You started strong and then you faltered. I'm doing okay.
It's the last 48 hours have been a little bit rodeo. My daughter's had like a tough night that led to a very bad night's sleep, which led to a tired and cranky girl who evidently who was not behaving particularly well at school, and so came home in a bad mood, and she's asleep, and hopefully she will get a good night's sleep and things will be better. But other than that, things are okay. My voice held out for the intro. I like that. That's good stuff. We'll see if I make it to the end of the show, but I'm still a little raspy, but we're heading in the right direction. And yeah, that's that.
Well, okay then. I guess we should just skip the rest of the pleasantries and get on with the main topic.
I mean, we've got a lot of main topic. This has been another like heavy news week, and so yeah.
Oh yeah. The first thing I want to say is this episode is going to be dropping on April Fool's Day, and none of these are April Fools. We wish they were. In fact, when we were bantering about this pre-show, someone had a really great idea, and it was too late to do something about it. So I just want to head that off at the pass. Yes, this is April 1st, but no, none of these are jokes.
Now I see what Sandra was talking about when I wandered into chat. I was only half paying attention. I had just finished an episode of Handgun Radio, and I was just finishing the details on that. So either way, yeah, no, we're not doing April Fools, and I am right now days old when I realize that this is dropping on April 1st. We are notoriously bad at not looking at what day the podcast is going to drop.
Yeah, I kind of live day to day at this point, maybe a few days ahead, but unless it's a really, really big thing like Halloween, Christmas, 4th of July, nah.
And even then, I don't know that it's next week.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Is it next week? Christmas? Oh, no. Well, I should buy some presents, shouldn't I? I'm thankfully of one of those. No. Is the once Black Friday happens, okay, after that, I need to quickly get my Christmas shopping done. So I'm still reactionary, but I'm just reactionary a month in advance. But yes, so these are not unfortunately joke stories. These are all serious, sometimes very serious stories. The first one is actually probably the gravest one, which is there was a massive terrorist attack in Russia. It was at a concert hall, and according to this news report, though again, a lot of the victim count is huge. There's a lot of injured people, and many of which are in critical condition. So, unfortunately,
yeah. Last I checked, it was something like 139 dead and 182, I want to say, injured.
Okay, yeah.
It was at, I don't remember what the Bataclan massacre in France was, but it was that type of thing. And yeah, this was it really, really nasty.
Let's see. Yeah, it's on par with the Bataclan Paris attacks. That one was including the 7 attackers. Screw you. Don't do that. Attackers aren't people. So it was 31 deaths there. So this one has already surpassed that. And both of those vastly surpass the Mandalay Bay shooting in Las Vegas, which is by far the most violent, the most deadly mass shooting in the United States, so long as you don't count American military wiping out the Native Americans. So I bring this up as a little bit of a solidarity. It sounds like the attackers were Chechen terrorists, and I unfortunately know that all too well, as the Boston Marathon bombing, of which happened when I was actually in Boston at work, was carried out also by Chechen terrorists, and ISIS has taken responsibility for them, and the Chechen terrorists in Boston were also trained by ISIS. So this definitely is a deja vu type moment, but the terrorist attack in Boston was minuscule in comparison. They thankfully were trained by ISIS, and ISIS is not very good at training, and we have to thank that blessing. Because that attack could have been far, far, far worse with a little bit more competency. And so we are thankful for that. Unfortunately, this seems to have been very, very well carried out. And so I bring that out just as in our heart goes out to the victims of this. Again, this was at a concert, so feel however you may feel about Russia. I know Russia's gotten into a lot of political heat, especially with the Russo-Ukraine war, and feel how you will about this, but all of Russia is not the Russian military and Vladimir Putin. So however you feel about the Russian military and Vladimir Putin, these people weren't it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you can really dislike, even outright hate the government of a nation, but you shouldn't hate its civilians. And these were innocent people, including children, who were there. Some were there for the concert. There was also, I believe, some sort of dance competition where a lot of the children were. And these, by the way, I didn't think that they were Chechen. I thought that their passports said they were from Tajikistan.
Okay, they may have. I was actually going off of an earlier report. Actually, the report that's in the show note, I've only roughly skimmed as just a more recent report. I was reading. I thought they were Chechen with the first report, but either way, it's the same. They're Caucasians in the quite literal sense of the word.
Again, I'm not sure of that, because I believe Tajikistan is to the north of Afghanistan.
Okay.
And so I think that's Central Asian, whereas the Caucasus are pretty much the dividing line between Europe and Asia.
Fair enough.
I know, I'm being all, well, actually.
I mean.
Yeah. So this was I don't really know if I want to say classic, but it was well planned. And what these scumbags did was and they filmed themselves. That's what kind of garbage they are. But they had incendiaries, and they started fires. And the idea was both to, deny escape, but also to herd people towards them. And they had guns, they had pistols, they had AKs, and they had knives. And they were slitting throats as well. And it's really, really bad. And here's what makes it worse. What makes it worse is that definitely the United States, they may not have known specifically it's happening on this day in this location, but they knew something was about to happen, and they warned Russia. There were other nations who knew about it, and I don't know if they warned Russia. I know that the UK knew about it and issued warnings to its people. I would think that they would have told them, but I don't know that for certain. But according to a BBC article, Vladimir Putin, who had just been elected, told the head members of FSB, Federal Security Bureau, which I believe is like the Russian equivalent of the FBI, and he basically said, don't listen to them, that's just Western paranoia, they're trying to destabilize our nation and delegitimize my election. So that happened.
To bring back to the Boston thing, the Chechen brothers who went back to Chechnya and to train with ISIS terrorists, either the FBI or the CIA, I'm not sure who, got wind of their communications back home and the reason for their travel, and actually put out an advisement that they were known terrorists and put them on the no-fly list. Unfortunately, they misspelled their names, so they got back on the plane and flew back to Boston.
Yeah. So, I'm trying to find a sliver of good news, and I'm not really finding it. What I'm trying to say is, while I desperately wish these innocent people had not been killed, maybe this will cause a massive lack of confidence in Putin. I mean, I know he's got a stranglehold on the election, but someone might remove him, is what I'm saying, and that might go some way towards redeeming this. It's very slim. This is just, it's awful. And continuing in this vein, I found out about this weekend, and I'm a big fan of Habitual Line Crosser. He's a YouTube content creator, and he put forth the notion, which I thought made a lot of sense, that this would give Russia the opportunity to withdraw from the war in Ukraine and save face. And they could say something along the lines of, well, now that we've had this terror attack within our borders, we need to concentrate on protecting ourselves, and so we are going to withdraw and reallocate our forces for self-defense. Essentially, oh, you got lucky this time, Ukraine. And that would allow them to stop this hideously, I'm trying to find a word here, because if I say unprofitable, that sounds cold.
How about you just say quagmire?
Wasteful. I mean, I don't, there's a term out there, but I can't find it. But I mean, it's just a disgrace. The people that are being killed and all the money that's being spent on ammunition and, all the vehicles burned and all the homes destroyed. I mean, you might as well just, light billions on fire for all the good that it's doing. And this would have allowed them to withdraw while saving face. Mm-hmm. And while the international community would probably, okay, we really know what's going on, but still, you could have the official narrative and you would understand that, okay, we're being attacked by terrorist elements from another nation or paranation or whatever you want to call ISIS. And, it's understandable. But Putin didn't do that. Instead, Putin made it seem like Ukraine backed all of this because these there were like 4 individuals that were captured. There may be a couple of others because the 4 that were captured fled in a stolen. Well, they fled in a car. If it's stolen, then the people to whom the car belonged are innocent victims. If the people to whom the car belonged gave them the car, then it's accomplices. That's kind of difficult to tell. But yeah, apparently they were fleeing towards Ukraine, and that's where they were caught. And so whether it's right or wrong, I don't know. I would imagine that Ukraine would spend its resources in other directions. But yeah, Putin looks like he's going to double down on this and say, oh yeah, Ukraine is now doing these terror attacks. We must go in again, and so on and so forth. So that's not good. Finally, the thing that I want to touch on here is, so the 4 that were captured, I find myself in a uncomfortable position because I am very much against police brutality. Because, first of all, it's horrible. People have rights. And also, if I ever find myself detained, questioned, imprisoned by the police, I want to have all of my rights intact. At the same time, these are people who filmed themselves massacring innocents. And so when they were brought before the camera, let's see, one was missing an eye, one was missing an ear. I don't remember about the third.
He was definitely marked up quite a bit.
They've all been tuned up. Well, yeah, one had a swollen face, and I think, 3 of them pled guilty, and I think the 4th one didn't plead guilty because he's, like, in a coma or something. And, yeah, Russians don't screw around.
No.
And so I find myself in this awful place of, for people who just committed mass murder against innocents, I'm really having a hard time feeling bad for them for being victims of police brutality. And I don't like feeling this way.
I have a number of friends that are avidly against capital punishment, and don't believe that the government should be executing people for any crimes whatsoever. And but very often I will find them saying when some famous killer or just horrible antisocial criminal is executed, going, I don't like the fact that the government's killing people, but I'm not going to lose a whole lot of sleep over this guy.
But he needed killing.
Exactly. And that's the same thing is, yeah, I don't like the fact that these guys have been carved up and beat up and in terrible shape. And there's questions on how they received those injuries, such as, was it in the apprehension of them, or were they actually attacked? Were they actually harmed as part of their interrogation? I don't know. And I
know how I'd vote.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't like that if that's the truth, but also I'm not going to lose a whole lot of sleep over these monsters.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. And the last thing I want to close at, and it's hard to do it without sounding snarky, but I don't mean it as such, but I will point out that Russia has insanely strict gun laws.
Mm-hmm.
There's, I think we talked about this a while back about how there is essentially a shotgun cartridge that is a 7.62 by 39 kind of necked up to straight wall, so that people can have AK pattern shotguns, because there is a license that you get where you're allowed shotguns but not rifles, and that's the first license you get as a Russian. So they have, while you can own guns, it is extremely restrictive and extremely incremental and all of that. And yet now, these guys...
You're not thinking of the Saiga, are you? Because I'm pretty sure that's 12 gauge.
No. There's something else that is literally designed. I want an AK, but I can't own a rifled barrel yet. So it's similar to the, I want an MP5 SK, but I don't want to pay a $200 tax stamp. So, oh look, arm brace and pistol.
Okay.
But the either way, they've got very, very strict gun control laws, and this is one of the largest firearms massacres in the entire world. And it was carried out with full auto weapons that are 110% illegal. But that's the fun part, is that, you know what, when you make all the guns illegal, the ones that are the ones that are most available are the ones that criminals use. Around here, they use stuff that they can steal from people. In that one, they use stuff that they can either buy from the black market or steal from militaries and police. And so, or get smuggled in through various ISIS channels, because they've got lots and lots of guns. And yeah, so this is one of those I haven't heard it in a long, long time, probably because of these attacks that have happened. But the statement that mass shootings are a uniquely American issue, this is just something to keep in the back of your mind. Again, anti-gun talking points and rebuttals to combat them. Because that's certainly something that the anti-gun groups have tried to do in the past, saying, oh, we need gun control laws because we have these horrible crimes that happen only in the United States. No, we don't.
So, it's really horrible that I find myself going, well, speaking of anti-gun groups, let's talk about the NRA.
I mean, they deserve it.
Yeah. So, yeah, there was a fire at the NRA headquarters in Fairfax the other day. When was that, Weird? It was this weekend, I'm pretty sure.
Let's see. It was the 23rd.
Yeah. Okay. So Saturday, that was this weekend. Mm-hmm. And we're still waiting. Well, at least I'm still waiting to find out, the effects of it. But so I have a suspicious mind.
I as well. I think everybody's list. If your mind isn't going to exactly where Aaron and I's mind went immediately, you haven't been paying attention.
Yeah. So it's reported that an old electrical transformer blew, and I mean that's not unreasonable because, as John Richardson No
Lawyers, Only Guns and Money.
Well, I was going to try that again, but okay, sure. That's why I snapped, but I don't even know how to do this.
I didn't hear the snap, but I will see it. If you want to try it again, all right. It's all there.
But as John Richardson of Only Guns and Money noted, that the headquarters has been in poor repair for quite a long time, including a roof leak that caused all sorts of damage, and the value of the building actually dropped by $1 million last year. And so it's possible, but it's also equally possible that this was arson. And, we can speculate all we like. The two more popular options are burn it down so we can collect the insurance money rather than having to pay to have all the things repaired because we want to move to Texas anyway, or burn it down because there's evidence there.
Yeah. And it's certainly the idea that there's like a roof leak. Like a roof leak is a very, very, very serious thing. As a matter of fact, Ryan Machad of Handgun Radio was complaining during the last taping because it was snowing where it was going on, and he was going to have to go out on his roof and rake it up because he's had trouble with ice dams, and he's going to be getting a new roof on his house just so he doesn't have to deal with that anymore. Roof leaks are a big deal and cause so much damage, both to the stuff inside, but also can be to the structure. Granted, it's probably a steel building, but either way, there's also concrete in there. It's not something that you take lightly, and they're letting this happen. It's just showing how upside down this organization has got, where we're spending all this money on, again, we got Wayne's suits and travel and
$100 million for the lawyers that completely botched this trial, I guess you could call it.
Yep. And of course also Wayne's lovely golden parachute that is covering all the damages. So Wayne LaPierre was found, guilty of inappropriate use of funds from the NRA and was forced to pay restitution, and the NRA paid him so he could pay restitution. So yeah, this and all of this while allegedly the roof is leaking and catching on fire. So, yeah.
Also, no word yet as to whether or not the museum was damaged. Of course, we don't know if the museum still exists anymore or if it was plundered to pay legal fees.
Yeah, and we honestly won't know until certain guns show up on the market that collectors will notice. And even then, as anybody who curates any museum knows, there is like 10 times as much stuff in the back rooms as there is on the exhibit floor. So even if a bunch of nice old rifles and handguns or shotguns show up for sale at various auctions, there's not really any way of knowing that they were NRA unless they're some particularly noteworthy pieces that were either on display or maybe the family members of the person who donated them recognize them. So the short answer is we'll never know if it was liquidated or not. So yeah, this is interesting. And again, there's also question of did it burn down accidentally or did they let it burn down? And that too we won't know. That's purely speculative. So, but it was worth noting. All right, now on to Aaron. We discussed this briefly before the show started because this is a messy story, and there's a lot of angles on this one. But there was this was on the 21st. So this was last Thursday. The executive, I believe, is head of security. Did I see that? I've got a couple articles listed here on his.
Well, it says executive director, which tells me that he was the head honcho in charge of running the airport.
Yeah. But so he was the head of director of Bill and Hillary Clinton National Airport. There should be a law against naming buildings after people, naming public buildings after people that are still alive.
Well, you kind of run into some problems with presidential libraries. Maybe that could be an exception.
Well, that's a presidential library, though. That's something different, and there's only one of them. I'm thinking about the myriad of Robert Byrd bridges and highways and buildings that are in West Virginia that were all erected while that filthy prick was still alive. This guy was the executive of the airport, and at 6:00 in the morning, his house was raided by the ATF. We were talking a little bit about this. Is that I've got one of the links I've got actually has a link to the actual arrest, the actual search warrant that was being executed here, and it does not specifically say anything about the method of the entry, and the reports have not specifically said about the method of the entry, but because a shootout ensued, and this man Brian Malinowski was shot in the head and later died of his wounds, and one ATF agent was shot and only suffered minor injuries. So because a shootout popped out, the fact that they're not really giving any details on how the shootout started.
Well, yeah, it's like you said, if he had preemptively opened fire by, shooting out a window or shooting through the door with a shotgun, they would have led with that. Mm-hmm. And they didn't. And the fact that it's an early morning, I mean, you called it a raid, and I'm not saying you're wrong, but, okay, the ATF just shows up at 6 a.m. Why would you show up at that particular time? And it seems to me that if all they wanted to do was search the house, there are other ways they could have done it. There are better ways they could have done it. For example, this is a man with a steady job. They know when he goes to work. He goes to work. You have some agents show up to, okay, they didn't have an arrest warrant. They couldn't arrest him, but they could detain him. They could ask questions. Meanwhile, the search warrant is executed while either no one is home or the wife is home. I don't know if she's a stay-at-home mom or not. But, there are ways to do it. And so the fact that he shot them and it was this early in the morning, plus given all the stuff the ATF has done, Waco, really makes me think that they did the equivalent of kicking the door down. And, hey, someone kicks your door down at 6 a.m. and you've got a family and you have guns, it's reasonable to assume in the chaos of, combat, really, you start shooting, and then there's other shooting, and so anything indicating that this is law enforcement is going to get lost.
Yeah.
And like we covered before, and I know you've got a lot to say about this, this is one of those things where I don't like the ATF. I don't trust the ATF. They might have been right this time because it kind of seems like this guy was engaged in gun trafficking. Although this could be as simple as he sold one gun too many, and that magically tipped him over the point where he should have been an FFL. And it's all very, very suspicious. The articles sure make it seem cut and dried that this was a wicked, evil arms merchant for profit, and he was buying lots of guns, and he was selling them without running a background check, and a lot of these guns were shipped off to places, and they ended up in the hands of criminals who used them to commit crimes. But, I get the feeling that there's perhaps more that isn't being said, because it's not like the ATF has ever played fast and loose with anything. So, yeah, I find myself going, they might be right, but even if they're 100% right, this all stinks, and there could have been a better and smarter way to do this that didn't end in loss of life.
I 100% agree, and that's the part where this stinks, is that, so, okay, the bad stuff. This guy allegedly bought hundreds of firearms, was selling some as a private seller at gun shows,
which is legal.
Yeah, which is legal, and was doing various things. But again, that's a very, very high volume, and of course, we don't know if he was buying hundreds of guns for his own personal collection. We certainly could rattle off 100 guns that we would want to have easily, as David said, 2 of each, so that they can be displayed so that you can see both sides. And
I mean, I don't know how much an executive director of an airport makes, but I'm pretty sure he was making in the 6 digits, and he had lots of disposable income for this sort of thing.
I would imagine, and so there certainly is some indication of impropriety. That being said, all the impropriety that he may be involved in, under no circumstance were they coming specifically for him. They were coming for searching his house for guns. I don't even know what they would be. I mean, they're searching for guns, but I'm not sure what the guns are going to say, because all the premises about him selling the guns. So,
yeah. And it's not like he was a violent criminal either.
No, and so they weren't there to arrest him, and they were just there to essentially find him on doing too much of a legal thing. Is really the argument, is that he was selling guns without background checks at gun shows and through private sales within the state is 100% legal activity. I'm sure most people in the sound that are hearing this have sold at least one firearm in their life. And that's a perfectly legal thing. And if you could sell one gun, maybe you could sell 2 guns. Maybe you could sell 3 guns. Maybe you could sell 4 guns. Where the magic cutoff to what's too many is not something that exists. Just the ATF knows when they see it. So that's the part that smells. Number one is that they weren't going to arrest him. It's not like they had videos of him selling to cartel members out of the trunk of his car or the local gangbangers in Little Rock. No, he had sold guns, and some of them turned up at crimes, and he bought a whole lot of guns. And again, the big thing is they showed up at 6 a.m., which, like, everything about the execution of this warrant is stupid. I am just appalled that we're doing this. I think many of you have seen the various police stings that exist where they send official mailers to, deadbeat dads and or people with drug warrants or things like that and say, hey, you've won a raffle for local sports team tickets or a big screen TV. Please show up at this and this date for the event where we will be giving you your big screen TV. And these guys all show up, and there's a ballroom at a hotel or something, and they've got big screen TVs like lined up at the front of it, and they say, hey, everybody, okay, is everybody here? Okay, well, it's time to kick off the event. Get them, boys. And the police all show up and just arrest everybody and process everybody. And they do it all in one fell swoop. And it's just it's a public interest story. You maybe have seen it just because someone showed it to you. It's like, oh, look at this. Isn't this clever? It's clever. This is not clever. They showed up at 6 o'clock in the morning, which is early enough for someone to be up and having breakfast, having coffee, getting ready for work, spending time with family and all that, or at least be in their waking moments before they get ready for work. And so they're not getting in at 3 o'clock in the morning. I actually had a relative who was a cop, and they would do drug raids at, like, I think they were doing it probably early in the morning, but these were people who were up late partying and doing lots of drugs. And so they would show up, and the guys would just be completely asleep, out of it. Some of them might not even be wearing clothes, and that makes it very, very easy. This was not that. The guy was there and did fire back or open fire, unknown. But why wouldn't they have either waited for him to go to work and then executed the raid on an empty house, or they could have waited for him to come home from work and somebody lets them know, all right, he's leaving the parking lot, he's headed home, and just when he shows up, there's a whole bunch of Suburbans with cops with badges out. Hello, sir. Good to see you. We'd like to hand you this warrant, and then you can either unlock your front door and let us in, or we can bash it down. That's your choice. And so he's there, and it's a known entity. I don't like this at all. And it harkens back to, and I put this story in the show notes, but this was back in 2012. There was a man who was a veteran. Allegedly, he had PTSD, and one of the things that he was doing was he was growing some marijuana for his personal use. And in Utah, that is not legal. And so the police executed a drug raid for him, and he was in the back bedroom asleep with headphones on because that helped him with his PTSD. And he heard his house being broken into. He grabbed an AR-15 and started shooting. He shot 6 officers and fatally wounded one of them, and then he escaped out the back. Was later arrested and then found hanging in his cell. I don't care what the circumstances are. That's bad form. But the big thing that got me on this one and got me reported back, I was blogging about this, was that he worked at a local Walmart warehouse, and this was steady work for him. It was a gun-free zone. If they were looking to arrest him, why didn't they just arrest him at work when they knew that he wasn't going to have guns with him? It's just think about things. Like I have no issue with the ATF issuing a warrant on this issue. It does sound like there is certainly enough probable cause for a search warrant on it. I may not necessarily agree with the laws that this guy allegedly was breaking, but they are the law of the land, and so therefore a warrant being executed is not a big deal. But the bottom line is, kicking down someone's door or otherwise doing suspicious things at suspicious times, there's better ways to have handled this. And so that's where I stand on this. Is maybe he was a bad dude. He wasn't shot in the head dead bad dude for sure. And I think some of the reason why shots were exchanged are either exclusively on the lap of the ATF, or the ATF's actions were definitely contributing to it. And I definitely think all law enforcement should be much more considerate with with execution of warrants, especially the idea of no-knock warrants. Because as you said before the show started, what's he going to do? Flush the guns down the toilet? I mean, the idea of no-knock warrants bothers me anyway, because, they'll flush the drugs down the toilet. Well, if you've got so little drugs in the house that you can send it down a toilet, then that's maybe not the reason why you want to be executing a warrant. Maybe that's not a big deal. And then, yeah, if you're a big enough fish, if you're dealing drugs and there is like pounds of drugs in your apartment, then a simple knock on the door should be able to clear most things up, and a fairly swift get in there. All right, if they don't answer the door in 5 minutes after we knock, we're taking out the battering ram and we're coming in. And then furthermore, yeah, if they're drug dealers, they probably have guns and they might be violent, because after the first felony, everything else is free. Why wouldn't you, again, send them a note and tell them they want a big screen TV? Wait for them to go to work. Wait for them to go to a movie. Don't raid them when they're home and they can fight back. This is just we need to be smarter about such things.
I hate how easily that pivots.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we need to be smarter about such things. So, the Department of Justice has issued the National Red Flag Initiative, and it's bad, and it's going to get worse. So, right now, it seems to be basically a clearinghouse of information. It's networking. And its purpose is to better assist people in using red flag laws to narc on people and, arrest the guns instead of arresting dangerous people or getting suicidal people the help that they need. And so, yeah, on Saturday, the Attorney General announced the creation of this new tool. And the Department of Justice partnered with the Johns Hopkins Center for Gun Violence Solutions, a wholly owned subsidiary of Michael Bloomberg Incorporated, and so created the National Extreme Risk Protection Order Resource Center. And the reason I say that it's only going to get worse is because this administration has proved that they're willing to go to all sorts of lengths in order to disarm people. And now that the federal government is involved, who knows what sort of federal resources will now be linked to this. And I'm sure that they're going to try and push red flag laws to be passed in other states, maybe even nationally. So I don't see anything good coming from this. And it's not like I think you will either, Weer'd. But can you give me a little bit of good news here?
Nope. Nope. This is just, red flag laws are awful. They are gun control dressed up in a white lab coat pretending to be mental health care, and they are not. I mean, even in the Massachusetts red flag law, specifically the Gun Owners Action League, when lobbying, specifically pointed out the fact that there is absolutely no provisions for mental health care in this. It's just lock up the guns. Come and take the guns, and that's it. If someone's suicidal, if they decide to seek any sort of help for that, that will be entirely voluntary on their behalf. If they are violent or threatening to somebody else, the red flag law does nothing. It's not a restraining order, so it's not keeping them away. All of that stuff would have to be done extraneously. It's just show up and take the guns. And this is horrible. This is bad. And then furthermore, we have a great example that we talked about here on the show with the shooter in Lewiston, Maine. He had been going through some severe mental health issues and had been causing a lot of problems within his National Guard unit, enough that somebody finked on him to Maine. And Maine has what's called a yellow flag law, which is essentially a red flag law, but a little bit nicer because there's at least some legal oversight on it. And the police had deemed probable cause that he was a danger to himself and others, and were told to execute a yellow flag. And they decided against it. They knocked on his door, but they didn't want to go too hard because they were worried he was dangerous, which was the whole reason why they were there. And they decided that maybe it wasn't worth, like the ATF raid that we just talked about, getting shot in the exchange between this guy. So this is bad. I hadn't quite realized from the story that this was from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. That's a big problem because, again, Michael Bloomberg bought himself a college so that he can conduct bogus gun violence research. And since we can't do it with federal money anymore, and there's nothing good that's going to come out of this. This is all just oppressive and damaging to people and disruptive to people's lives and wrought with abuse. And also has the potential, even in the best situation, where there is someone who is stalking, say, a former partner, and then all of a sudden the cops show up and come and take all their guns. They're going to know who did it. They're going to be like, oh, I know exactly who called the cops on me. And how do you think that's going to make them feel? Same thing with if you are suicidal. And next thing you know, the police come and they stomp in on your house. They've probably got guns drawn themselves because they know that they're coming to collect guns. So therefore, there's always a potential that the person might shoot it out with them or suicide or want suicide by cop. So therefore, they're going to be protecting themselves. And they come and they violate your domicile and take your property, and then they leave. Like, how's that going to make you feel? Is that going to get you the mental health care that you need? No, this is crap. So yeah, this is not a great thing. I see nothing good about this. The only thing good that I see is that we were talking about being worried about this when the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act was passed, because essentially one of the many minor things that it does is provide federal funding for states that adopt red flag laws. And we were concerned that there was going to be a massive run towards red flag laws. And there really hasn't been. I'm trying to think if a state has passed it recently. I'm sure there has been one that's done it. But overall...
Well, I don't know about that, but the last paragraph of this article specifically says that this new research center is funded by the 2022 Bipartisan Safer Communities Act.
Oh, look at that. So Michael Bloomberg finally has gotten his federal funding to fund anti-gun research.
Mm-hmm.
He just worked his way around the Dickey Amendment sideways. I mean, good on you, Michael Bloomberg. you're so wealthy that you brag about the fact that you'll never be able to spend all your money in your lifetime, but you certainly are happy to take ours.
And now for the last bit. It's still bad, but there's some humor to it.
Yeah, this is crossing over from bad to stupid.
This is farce, is what it is. And so, I just have to read the headline here. Chicago sues Glocks over switch that converts pistols to machine guns.
And it's that dumb.
Yeah, we talked about this. I don't know if it was last episode or one before, but we mentioned that the Glock switch was not made by Glock. It was made by I think you said a Venezuelan man?
Correct, yep.
Yeah, and so Chicago is suing Glock because their guns can take these aftermarket switches, and therefore it's Glock's fault that people are being shot by illegal machine guns. And if Glock really cared, they would apparently massively redesign and retool their guns and all of their manufacturing facilities in order to ensure that the Glock switch couldn't work. Which, of course, doesn't mean that you couldn't find another way to do it.
Yes. I mean, there's the big one is that is that like the first auto-loading guns, the first real auto-loading gun was the Maxim machine gun. And like when you look at something simple like the Sten, it's, if you're not converting the Glock over by using the Glock switch, and I don't actually know the particulars of exactly what the Glock switch interrupts to make the gun go full auto, but in theory, I don't think it would be very, very hard to convert a Glock to convert the sear from a sear that cocks the striker to fixing the striker to the breech face and just converting it to an open bolt gun, like the Stechkin or the Rack pistols that were just open bolt, the full auto pistols. So just let the slide come home, and then when you release the trigger, it locks the slide back. It takes extra pieces to make a gun semi-auto.
I was waiting for you to say that. If you didn't, I would have.
Yeah, it was an order of magnitude harder to make a full auto gun semi-auto, and so the fact that like this just magic, we could just make the Glocks different and therefore they won't accept it. I mean, that doesn't change the fact that there are literally like millions upon millions of pre-whatever, Glocks out there right now. And then there's huge amounts of Glock copycats out there that you could easily get a hold of and convert to the switch. And again, you could change the gun around and we could still figure out ways to make it full auto if we were determined enough. Again, this was not invented by Glock. This was invented by a dude in Venezuela who was stolen from. He's not making any money off of these. And the big one is why is Chicago suing Glock? Why are they not suing people like Google and Facebook, who just openly sell these things? I mean, I talked about it in my fist. That was episode 289, so it was a few episodes ago. The Google said, "Oh, well, we can't really be bothered to figure out all the local laws when it comes to machine guns." You also can't be bothered to figure out, if that's your statement, you can't be bothered to figure out that the NFA is a national firearms act.
I mean, I just assumed those were FBI and ATF honeypots.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people assumed, but it does appear that all the info is pointing out the fact that no, they're just selling to whoever wants to take out ads, and the various companies that are making these Glock switches are saying, yeah, Facebook and Google, sell our illegal Glock switches from China that we're totally marketing as airsoft parts or keychains or whatever. They're all marketed under dumb stuff, but at the same time, it's not like you can't Google them as Glock switches. So they're being called Glock switches, but then they're saying, oh, no, but it's not actually full auto Glock switches. It's totally something different. Wink, wink.
So I've got some thoughts on this. So the first one is, this is like suing a car manufacturer because people are putting nitrous oxide boosters on their cars and using them in illegal drag races in the city. And if the car manufacturers were really concerned, they would make their car incapable of being nitrous boost. And, you know, when you phrase it like that, you understand just how monstrously stupid it is. Especially
if you know how a nitrous fogger works. I've literally saw Cletus McFarland, who's actually the new owner of the Daytona Speedway. He calls it he renamed it the Freedom Factory. So he's right in your vicinity. He actually literally had cars where there was just a hose taped to the inlet of the turbocharger that for the nitrous bottle. Like, it's if you don't want to do it super in a super precise way, you can nitrous boost anything with like duct tape and zip ties. So your analogy is remarkably good.
Thank you. So the second thought is that this is, by design or by accident, this is a test case.
Oh, yeah.
And if this passes, then you're going to see very similar, I can't think of anything off the moment, but the point being is, if you can find a gun manufacturer guilty because a third party can manufacture something for it, hey, your gun has threaded barrels, and suppressors without a Form 3 are illegal. So you are now letting people buy illegal silencers and use them to assassinate people. It's this level of garbage.
Plus, I mean, how many different long guns out there come with the quad rail on them? And hey, guess what? The quad rail can be used to affix these 37 millimeter flare launchers. Except for, we all know that there are various people that have put, like, you know, buckshot and various other 37 millimeter projectiles, which turn these quote unquote flare launchers into, literal destructive devices. And so the idea that, oh, it's got a quad rail, so therefore you can mount an illegal grenade launcher to your gun. So therefore we should sue all the gun makers because everybody puts a quad rail on their gun. Even you can get a lever action rifle with a quad rail on it these days.
Honestly, this reminds me of the incident with the Phillips family suing, not Lucky Gunner, but Bushmaster.
Well, no, the Phillips family sued Lucky Gunner. Bushmaster was sued by the Sandy Hook Promise, I believe.
Okay. But still, that's really what this feels like. The difference here is that when they sued Bushmaster, i.e. Remington was either completely out of business or was going out of business, and it was settled by insurance companies.
Well, that case lasted I think 12 years. So Remington was an intact company, though not doing well at the time, and then succumbed to its wounds during the court case. And it was indeed the insurance adjusters that were the people that actually settled the case. So people have said, oh, Remington did us dirty. I'll never own another Remington gun. Well, number one, if a new Remington 700 shows up or Remington 870 shows up at a gun shop, it's likely being made by somebody else. I forget who owns which IP for which product, but the various stuff has been chopped up and sold to the highest bidder. But also the people that settled this case are not gun people. These are pencil pushers. And they just decided that this was the best course of action.
Yeah, but In contrast, Glock is very much a going concern. It's incredibly profitable. They have lawyers. And while I can't say for certain how this is going to turn out, I would say that Glock has a pretty good chance because, again, they're soluble. They have lawyers. And I would think it would take only the most stridently anti-gun judge and jury to somehow find Glock culpable for this.
Yeah, and actually, I'm reading this from the article. This complaint is the first to use the Illinois Firearms Industry Responsibility Act, or FIRA. And this law allows gun manufacturers to be held accountable for public harm caused by action or inaction from their sales or marketing practices. Well,
this is neither.
Yeah, and the gag that I threw onto my my audio fisc was the fact that that the Glock switch doesn't actually make the gun any more dangerous when it's switched to full auto. It just shifts the burden of danger away from the person downrange to the person behind the gun, and so it doesn't make the gun any more dangerous. It makes the gun safer if you're standing in front of it, because the rate of fire on these things is insane, and so you're even skilled shooters aren't able to make a good grouping with this, or do much more than a couple of controlled bursts in like a 30-round magazine.
Mm-hmm. But like you said, FIRA says they can be held accountable for harm caused by action or inaction from sales and marketing practices. This is neither. Mm-hmm. If anything, this would be a manufacturing practice, but the law doesn't address that. So, I mean, I would like to see this laughed out of court. In a just world, it would be, but we know we don't live in a just world. And so I don't know what the firearm of Chicago police officers is. It might be Glock, it might not, but I would love to see Glock USA pull a Ronnie Barrett and go, okay, we will never sell a gun to you again, and we will not service your guns, and if you send them to us, we're not sending them back.
I just stumbled on a website. It's Athlon Outdoors. According to Chicago Police, and I don't know how true this is. Oh, there we go. The Sig Sauer 320, they have listed as splash, but CPD allows a wide variety of duty pistols for officers, including the Glock 17 or 19, Springfield XD pistols, Smith & Wesson M&P, Sig Sauer 320. So yeah, so there are absolutely Glock pistols in Chicago PD holsters.
Yeah, I'm on the same site. Reportedly, some 25,000 officers have chosen the Glock 19 as their duty weapon, making the force Glock dominated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I mean, I still think that. So one of the key factors on the Remington case where Bushmaster was being sued for Sandy Hook was that Connecticut had it was very similar to this, where it was marketing, and they were claiming the various ads that Bushmaster used to sell their rifles, specifically the Man Card Renewed ad, cringeworthy ad, we're saying was inspiring to killers. As smarter legal minds than me have noted, it would be very, very interesting for them to prove that the killer had even seen any of these ads to be influenced, because it wasn't like he bought the gun because this was his mother's gun and he murdered his mother to steal it. Mm-hmm. So there is that. And again, this is not sales or marketing, because again, the Glock switch is a third-party entity not made by Glock. This is not there's no Glock certified Glock switch. If you want a full auto Glock, they make the Glock 18. and this was
Good
made
luck.
by a dude from Venezuela, and these pieces are either being 3D printed or manufactured on the black market here, or manufactured in factories in China. So yeah, we will see how the how this works its way out of the courts, and given such legal assaults on the Second Amendment, and the fact that the courts really have been the bulwark of our defense against the anti-gun movement, I sat down with Second Amendment attorney Kostas Moros on the 2A cases that are currently in the court system and that he's handling directly. I am pleased to welcome back to the Assorted Calibers podcast, Kostas Moros. He is a Second Amendment attorney, and of course, I think you've probably all read his tweets. If you haven't, you're missing out. How you doing, Kostas?
Good, thanks for having me on.
I think the something that everybody wants to hear, because we know you've got a lot of irons in the fire and you're dealing with a lot of very, very important Second Amendment cases. Can you give us a brief overview of what you're dealing with right now?
Well, right now my main focus is on the various carry cases in California. So two of them in particular, I work on a lot of cases, but these two are my babies, I guess, because I've been on the lead on them. So one is May v. Bonta, that's Reno May, he's a YouTuber, and a number of other plaintiffs that are challenging California's what is effectively a ban on carry. So what California did in response to Bruin was pass a law that basically bans carry everywhere. That includes, all banks, bars, public transportation, libraries, museums, stadiums, any business that doesn't post a sign saying carry is allowed here. You can't carry there. So all sorts of crazy stuff. If your listeners are aware of the New York law, it's basically a copy of that one, the Bruin response law that Governor Hochul passed. So Hochul, I'm not sure how you say that.
I believe it's Hochul, but that's fine.
Hochul, yeah. So we sued once it passed, and we got a preliminary injunction from Judge Carney in the Central District. And then, of course, California did what it always did and asked when we went in the district court, it asked the Ninth Circuit for a stay. And then it was kind of a chaotic situation because you had a motions panel of the Ninth Circuit not decide it, but decide to grant an administrative stay on the injunction. And administrative stays are only supposed to happen when the status quo would be interrupted, but the status quo was on our side, so we immediately did a motion for reconsideration and said, hey, you're ignoring your own precedent here. You're not supposed to do an administrative stay when the status quo is when we're the ones preserving the status quo. So then a week later, the actual motions panel, who will hear the case next month, dissolved the administrative stay and put our injunction back into effect. So other than a week in early January, SB2, which is the name of the bill, never took effect because we stopped it. So that was cool. And we have our appeal hearing next month. But based on the fact that the panel dissolved the administrative stay, we feel really good about the appeal. We think we'll at least be mostly successful. I'm not saying we'll bat 1,000. We might, lose one or two places. I hope not. But I think we will preserve the right to carry in California. So that's one case. That's May v. Bonta. The other case, where we have a preliminary injunction hearing next week in district court, is CRPA versus Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, in which we're suing that sheriff's department and also the city of Laverne and the California DOJ for a number of issues related to wait times and high fees. But I think most interesting to your listeners, being probably primarily in other states than California, is we are also suing on reciprocity. So California does not honor the permits of any other state. And so if you are not a resident of California, you have no right to carry in California. There's no way to do it. So we're suing them. Our first ask is we want the court to make California honor the permits of other states. But if she's not willing to go for that on a preliminary injunction, we do ask as a backup that people can at least apply for a California CCW. That's incomplete relief because getting a California CCW is a lot of work and it's probably not going to be practical for most people in other states, but at least there will be some avenue if she does that to get a California CCW. So I talked really fast, but those are the two cases that I've been working on the most lately. And of course, there's also cases that are moving their way through, like the Illinois assault weapons case, our Duncan magazine case, all sorts of others.
Oh, wow. I mean, and these are really amazing cases because they do have probably a much broader impact than a lot of people may think. I mean, obviously the restriction on carry is ridiculous because, even though there may be piecemeals of, oh, you can carry here and you can carry there, the fact that there aren't provisions in various places for, if you are concealed carrying, for you to enter an establishment that bans it, creates a de facto ban. I mean, I used to work at an employer that banned the carry of firearms, that was in Boston, and that meant that when I got up in the morning, and I took the train in, so when I got up in the morning, I could not put on my firearm because while I could get on the train and ride into Boston and walk across town to get to my my place of employment, the moment I crossed into the door, I was violating their policy. And that was just policy, not the law. So it has even more weight to it in California with how they're doing it, as well as New York, which I assume that if you are victorious on this, it will have implications on places like New York and New Jersey that have also done similar type response bills.
Well, maybe we're in the ninth. So if we win in the Ninth Circuit, that will create a circuit split probably with Antonyuk, which is the Second Circuit case that they struck down. The Second Circuit did strike down the vampire rule, which is the one I'm talking about, where the business owners have to post a sign saying you're allowed to carry. So that's the absolute worst part. Without that, at least there's some right to carry, but they did uphold the other provisions like the parks, I think the bars. So they did uphold it. So if we mostly prevail, we'll create a circuit split with the Second Circuit, and then that will make the Supreme Court likely to take one of these cases to decide the issue, because the Supreme Court hates circuit splits. They hate, they don't want one set of rights in one circuit and another set of rights in another circuit. So that's where we'll be most likely to get a Supreme Court case, but we'll see.
And another context thing for the no recognition of outside permits and no non-resident permitting. There's another state that does that exact practice, and it is New York State, and that is something that people in the Northeast frequently encounter. I'm here in New England, and whenever I'm traveling south, you have that stretch of New York, depending on how you traverse it, where there is no way for you to legally carry or, really even legally possess the guns outside of the Firearms Owners Protection Act. And so it really does, it really kind of separates, New England from the rest of the country, because New York State stretches from Canada to the ocean. And of course, obviously, California is the vast majority of the West Coast. So the fact that there's not an avenue at all to have firearms with you when traveling into that state is no small factor.
And I'm convinced. I think I hope we get a full scale win and force California to honor the permits of other states. But we didn't get the. We're hopeful we'll convince her, of course, but we did get a judge assigned to us who was appointed by Joe Biden. And, there's always exceptions, but generally speaking, a judge appointed by Joe Biden is going to tend to be more liberal, more in favor of gun control. So we're hoping we can convince her, but at least we hope for the purposes of a preliminary injunction, because of course this will still then go to a trial and all that, but we hope to at least make California let people apply. So if we do succeed on either level, the maximum win or the more compromised win, I'm sure somebody will be filing a lawsuit in New York basically copying us, so to do the same thing there on reciprocity. So I hope that happens. We'll see.
Yeah, that would be awesome. So you know what? Since this is something that I've been talking a lot about on the show, and I do not have the legal expertise that you do. You mentioned that there's assault weapon ban cases pending. We've got one from Massachusetts, I believe one from New Jersey. I think there's a few other. California has one, I think that's orbiting. Am I correct on all this? That there's a bunch that are.
Yeah. The usual suspects. So There's the 4 in Illinois, which are going to the Supreme Court, or have asked for the Supreme Court to review them on a preliminary injunction basis. I'm the attorney in one of those, not the attorney, but part of the attorneys in that case. There's Bianchi in Maryland for the Maryland assault weapons case, which is petitioned to the Supreme Court. So those are the ones in the Supreme Court, but there's also others, like you said, in the process, like Miller in California. I forget the Rhode Island one. There's a Connecticut one. There are all the usual suspect states have these laws, and they are all being challenged right now. So
because there are so many, and because of the NYSERPA test really kind of simplifies what the argument against these bans are. What do you think the possibility of these cases being combined together as one is? Like I said, if and I think the Massachusetts one's been waiting for hearing for ages. So I don't know why there hasn't been any movement or any updates on that. So do you think that the Supreme Court is kind of gathering forces for a combined case?
We're going to see what they're going to do right now, because right now they have cases on a preliminary injunction posture, and Bianchi is an even more interesting posture. That one is a cert before judgment. So Bianchi, that one went through an appeal oral argument in December 2022 after being remanded from Bruin. They didn't get a ruling for over a year. Then in January 2024, without a ruling from the 3-judge panel, then the Fourth Circuit en banc decided that they were going to take the case en banc. And what that tells us is the 3-judge panel was going to rule to strike down the assault weapons ban, and the more liberal judges on the Fourth Circuit decided to take it en banc. So it's a confusing mess. But because of that, the plaintiffs in that case filed for cert before judgment, which is a very unusual thing to do, but it's probably called for. And that's when you're telling the Supreme Court, hey, we're basically not going to get a fair shot below, and you need to intervene now and not wait for this. So we'll see what they do with that one. But the more conventional ones are the Illinois cases that are on a preliminary injunction posture. And the disadvantage we have in those cases is that historically the Supreme Court doesn't like to take cases that are preliminary injunction cases. They want to wait till a final judgment, which would take another year or two to work through both the trial court and the appeal. So we hope they'll get involved here, but the reality is often they don't. So after that, the next chance would be our case, which is just magazines, not assault weapons bans, but it asks similar questions. And that's Duncan v. The one that caused California Freedom Week some years ago. Yep. And that's Duncan v. Bonta. And that one will be decided by the Ninth Circuit en banc, I think, this month at some point. There's oral arguments, and then they'll of course release an opinion some months from now. That one is a final judgment. So when we're expected to lose, unfortunately, because of the composition of the en banc panel. But after that, we'll see if the Supreme Court cares. But to your question, I'm rambling. Sorry about that. But to your question about combining cases, I think it's more likely that the Supreme Court will pick its favorite. Let's say it was going to grant cert to one of these Illinois cases right now. They might combine them, but I think more likely they'll grant cert to one and hold the rest, and just hold them pending the ruling on that one. And that way they can have a simplified argument, because if they combine them, then they have to give, I think, all these different lawyers a chance to argue. They're all arguing the same stuff, so it becomes kind of confusing. But I don't pretend to be an expert on the Byzantine Supreme Court procedures, so we'll see what they do. Yeah.
All right, and I've got one more purely speculative question for you. Is that we have seen, I've always read the in common use clause from the Heller decision as a means to keep that decision very, very narrow, so that they weren't doing, really kind of what NYSERPA is sort of is doing, and just saying, no. The Second Amendment means what it says, and it always has been. Let's keep this narrow, so not causing a huge problem. But obviously, as the cases are getting closer and closer to the original meaning of the Second Amendment, the reaction to the states that have been violating the Second Amendment have been more and more extreme. Do you think that the Supreme Court might be getting impatient and angry and maybe possibly have a less narrow view of how they should hold their ruling, or do you think that that they will keep cool heads in the next few pending cases that are Second Amendment related?
Oh man, that's a tough one. So we're going to know pretty soon based on how they react to these Illinois cert petitions. But if they're very irritated and they're very impatient, then they'll grant cert on one of those cases. But the Supreme Court does tend to like, even when the Supreme Court is unhappy with the circuit courts, they tend to like to let what's called case percolation. It's a term that annoys me, but they do it. So, and that's letting the circuits all have their say before they get involved. You know, they want to see what the circuits decide. You know, after Heller, it took, other than McDonald and Caetano, which one was applying the Second Amendment to the states and the other was a Massachusetts stun gun ban, they didn't take a Second Amendment case for like over a decade, 2008 to 2022, other than those two. So it took a long time for these errors that the circuits were making to be corrected. I hope that's not what happens again here, especially because we have a more favorable court composition that hopefully is more interested in taking these sorts of cases. But it's important context to keep in mind that a lot of times this stuff is slow going. So I hope we move faster here, and I think we'll have some hints very soon.
Oh, well, I mean, that's awesome. Thank you so much for all that insight, because I have just been speculating on what I've been reading and gathering about the courts, but I don't have your boots on the ground experience of it. So I really appreciate that. Yeah, thank you so much for fighting the good fight that you are fighting. And I will also remind people that we should not be relying entirely on the Supreme Court to do all our Second Amendment work. We should, for whatever we should have, when Donald Trump took office, he said he supported us. We should have been passing the Hearing Protection Act and national reciprocity, but time will see. But we should also be encouraging our elected officials to be sending out Second Amendment bills so that it's not all up to the Supreme Court just striking down the bad laws.
Absolutely. It's when you get to the litigation front, that's the slowest, most painful option. So definitely easier to win elections and get elected representatives to make changes. But thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kostas.
So when Kostas mentioned Rhode Island, I don't know if he was referring to Ocean State Tactical v. Rhode Island, or if there's another Rhode Island case that I'm not aware of, but just in case, Ocean State Tactical, we've joined. Operation Blazing Sword Pink Pistols has joined as an amicus in that case. And so on a related note, both in terms of amicus and Kostas Moros with Michelle and Associates lawyers, he just, I'm going to call it tweeted because you can't make me say the other thing.
He was betwixt.
You know, I like that. I don't remember what the official thing is, but I like that one. But yeah, he tweeted, thanks to Anna Barvier, who, by the way, I mentioned her before. She's my main point of contact with Michelle and Associates. Due to her superb revisions, I can continue to pretend I can write legal briefs. And thanks, of course, to all of our amici, including CRPA News, Gun Owners California, FFL-IL, Second Amendment Defense and Education Coalition, and Pink Pistols. So I'm pretty sure he's referencing Antoniuk v. Hochul. I'm not sure, but I think that's the most recent one. So yeah, I really look forward to seeing how this goes.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly for the time since with Joe Biden in the Oval Office, where pretty much we could do whatever we wanted to try to correct this in the legislature, and it's just going to get the veto pen. For the time being, right now, this is really the best avenue of defense, because clearly the anti-gun states aren't going to listen to reason. They're you're declaring that our gun control laws are unconstitutional. Well, guess what? I'm going to do it only harder. So yeah, we will see where these go, and Yeah, like as I said in the interview, I'm really hoping that the Supreme Court's going to get nasty and just be a little bit more wrath of God, of the no, it means what it says, God damn it.
Mm-hmm. Aha! I just found it. It was another tweet by Kostas, and yes, it is indeed Antonyuk v. Hochul. And I just found it. We're not going to discuss it, but I'm going to provide a link to the amicus in the show notes.
Marvelous.
Well, they aren't calling it Hochul anymore. Now it's Antonyuk v. James. It's probably the same thing. I'm not certain.
Yeah.
But all we know is that it's involving New York because James is the acting superintendent of the New York State Police. So there you go. Hey, Weer'd, what do you call a chess piece made by a resin 3D printer?
I don't know, Aaron.
SLA Queen.
Welcome to Oddball's Corner Pocket. In episode 288, David did a very brief overview of his experience with 3D printing. I thought I might go into a bit more detail for anyone that's looking to get started. Actually, this will probably be a series since there's a good bit to cover. To start with, you need to decide what kind of 3D printer you want. While there are several different technologies out there, each with their advantages and disadvantages, there's really only two to choose from in the hobbyist market. Both technologies work under the same premise. The machine prints one thin layer of the object and then stacks another layer on top of that, and so on and so on. Add enough layers and you have the object that you wished to print. The first type is SLA, or stereolithography printers. Usually they're just referred to as resin printers. These printers use liquid resin as their medium. They have a plate that dips into a pool of resin and has an LCD screen under the pool. The LCD shines an image of the layer that is being printed up into the vat of resin with UV light, which causes the resin to harden into that shape. The plate should be in the vat low enough that the hardened resin sticks to it, and after that layer is hardened, the plate lifts up a bit, and the screen then displays the next layer, which then attaches to the one that was just printed. Honestly, watching a time-lapse of these printers work looks downright magical. A clean plate enters the vat of liquid resin and pulls out a solid object attached to it. I'll find a YouTube video example and throw it in the show notes. After the print is done, there is some post-processing that is necessary. First, it's a good idea to wash off the print in isopropyl alcohol to remove the excess resin. After that, you should expose it to a good amount of UV light to essentially finish baking the resin. While you can do these options using a bucket and simply setting the printed object out in the sun, there are purpose-made products that will hit the object with an IPA mist or bath and then hit it with UV lights. Usually these are separate stations, but I believe there are some systems that combine both steps for you in one unit. These printers are fantastic at fine detail and small objects. It's standard for resin printers to print with a layer height of somewhere between 1 and 5/100ths of a millimeter. To put that in perspective, your standard printer paper is roughly 1/4 of a millimeter. This means that there's a decent chance that you wouldn't notice the layer lines in the object without running your fingernail over it. These printers are great if you're looking to print small items with high detail, such as wargaming miniatures and other decorative objects. Of course, there are some downsides to these printers. First, by the nature of having to use a vat of liquid, most of these printers are fairly small. While there are examples of printers that have 330mm by 330mm print plates and can print objects 180mm tall, Most printers are closer to 134 by 75 by 130 millimeters, which is great for printing minis, but not a whole lot else. Also, the resin tends to be brittle, and not a good choice for so-called practical prints. Of course, there are exceptions, but that's the general rule. Second, you're dealing with liquid resin. This means that if you're anything like me, there's a high chance of creating a mess by spilling it. Also, this resin is generally considered to be a bad thing to get on you until it hardens, and you should always wear protective equipment when handling. At least wear gloves. It also means that there will be liquid waste to deal with. There's just no way to get away from that between the IPA bath and the leftover resin in the printing vat, which is generally considered hazardous and should be treated as such. Of course, you also have to make sure that you clean the printer's resin vat as soon as possible, and be careful how you store the resin, since sunlight and anything else emitting UV light will cause the resin to harden. The other technology is FDM, or Fused Deposition Modeling. The printer that David was talking about in his segment is of this type and is often referred to as a filament printer, due to it using a spool of strands of plastic. This plastic is fed into a hot nozzle that heats it to just above melting temperature and essentially draws the layer onto the print bed, and then the next layer on top of that. If the time-lapse of a resin printer is magic, the time-lapse of an FDM printer is a marvel of machinery. Again, I'll put a video in the show notes. FDM printers don't have the high precision that resin printers do. FDM printers print layers that are typically literally an order of magnitude taller, usually somewhere between 1 and 3/10 of a millimeter. This means that you can generally see the line on a curved surface. That said, they do have some pretty decent advantages over resin printers. First, the printer medium is solid. This means that you don't have to deal with the issues of handling a liquid. The material also doesn't need any post-processing done to it, and storage is not nearly as much of a concern. If you're anything like me, that's a pretty big deal. Next, these printers typically have significantly larger printing areas. David's Ender 3 V2 is pretty much the standard size for smaller printers of this type, with a print area of 220 by 220 by 250 millimeters, while printers with print areas of over 300 millimeters cubed are not unusual. And Elegoo has just announced the OrangeStormGiga with a print area of 800 by 800 by 1000 millimeters, just in case you need to print a life-size print of a small child. Of course, with this style of printer, if you really need something larger than that, you can always build a custom printer with a little technical know-how and the proper lengths of extruded aluminum. Lastly, depending on the capability of your particular printer, you can print with a wide array of materials, including plastics that most folks are familiar with, like PLA and ABS. This makes FDM printers perfect for printing, quote, practical prints that include things like hinges or will be subjected to impacts or must bear weight, etc., including firearms-related prints, if that's what you wish to do. Since the printers that I own are FDM printers, this series will focus on them, and I'll dive deeper into them in my next segment. Oh, and I know that Weer'd and Aaron commented on David and I reporting all issues that we've had with 3D printing. For the most part, these issues have been similar to the issues that most folks have getting into any new hobby, especially when that hobby includes working with tools, the Tronxy excluded. I hope that this has been interesting and that you've learned something. More of my thoughts can be found at gunscarstech.com. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future segments, I can be reached at oddball@gunscarstech.com or on the ACP Facebook page. Oh, and if you haven't already, check out my wife's new podcast called Meowcore about heavy metal and cats. Until next time, have a good one.
Oh, Aaron, by chance, did you check out the links that Oddball provided for the time lapses?
Oh gosh, I watched the first one, which was really impressive. I meant to do the second one, and I didn't. But you know what? I killed the volume. That's also cool, although it's not as magical as the SLA. But it's still very impressive. Yeah,
the pool of goo that arises out. Actually, I was thinking, what do I reference that? It just popped into my head is the Baron Harkonnen coming out of the pool of goo from the from the latest Dune movie. Well, not the latest one because the part 2, but the modern reimagining. I haven't seen part 2 yet. But yeah, the 3D printing is cool, but again. If you listen to the ACP blooper reel, you too hear a lot of Oddball and David talking about 3D printing and the issues that come from it, and it makes me want to just sit back and wait till it gets debugged a little bit better.
But yeah, just that first one, it looks like the 3D printer is doing the equivalent of pulling a rabbit out of a hat.
Yeah, just. The plate dips down into the goo and suddenly a figurine magically appears.
Yoink. Yeah, that's really neat.
Yeah, and Oddball makes all sorts of stuff. I know he just, speaking of we've been talking a lot about Glocks. He discovered that there's a company that sells just essentially a Glock parts kit, all the bits minus the actual Glock itself. And Oddball goes, "Oh no, I own a 3D printer, and this is really cheap."
Uh-huh. Yeah, I saw that.
and I immediately posted the Glong music video. Because why would you not make a Glock that's also a bong? As Oddball says, that's called probable cause. But you know who's more sensible than a Glock that is also a bong?
I mean, talk about an embarrassment of riches. Most things, but especially our listeners.
Our listeners, you guys are exceptionally reasonable and good looking. So good looking. But we have to give a very special thanks to all supporters on Patreon. To be on our Patreon patron, go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers Podcast to sign up. Patrons get an early release of the podcast, plus bonus content like the ACP blooper reels, the ACP film track, and the ACP mag dump.
Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to us on the platform of your choice, and share the show with your friends both online and off. And hey, by the time this drops, you've maybe got one more day to switch from using Google Podcasts if you're still using that, because it's going to die on the 2nd.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. We recommend Pocket Casts, but there are all sorts of other apps. Just find one that works for you, because we would hate for you to miss one of our episodes because Google stopped supporting an app.
That is true. Yeah, again, Pocket Cast is great. I have switched to using it exclusively. I don't even miss the Google Podcasts anymore. It works on my phone, but it also works in my car. And I got a blog. It's called Weer'dWorld.com. That's WeerdWorld.com. And hear me weekly on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
And you can get more from me at linktree/Aaron Paulette. That's linktree.ee/Aaron Paulette, all one word. And believe you me, within the next few days, so by the time you hear this, it'll already have dropped, we will be issuing a press release regarding this amicus filing.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
And thanks to Nate Spencer for our lovely music.
He's dyslexic, and I can read faster than I can listen, which is why I really hate videos. Our learning styles are assorted, and so's our podcast. Good night, everyone.
Good night.